One Bronze Knuckle, or The Exquisite Catastrophe of Love, being a novel in 15 parts, detailing the lives and adventures of various disparate, not to say desperate characters, making their way through a world no less topsy-turvy than our own, derived wherever possible from original and authentic sources, here compiled and accompanied by such explanatory notes and digressions as are necessary for complete understanding, and presented with all humility and gratitude by Kenneth Hunter Gordon. At the frayed edges of the district, 2 days' travel or more past Burgerton, where the poorest farms faded into the wooded wilderness that surrounds us all, was a tiny hamlet called Watts Hump. Beyond that was the last farm, and at the edge of the last farm's last field was a haystack where 2 boys were sitting huddled in the late afternoon, trying to figure out what to do. One was soaking wet, the other was dry and dusty with horse dung in his hair. The wet one shivered, and the one with dirty hair spoke. "We gone the wrong way. Nothing past here but trees and rocks. We gone the wrong way." You will need to know that these boys were the nephews of the Burgermeister, one the son of his brother, and one the son of his sister, and that they had run away from Burgerton. Later on you will need to know why, but for now it is sufficient that you know the older, by 4 months, dry, dirty boy was named Cordage Broom, and that the younger, wet, shivering boy was called simply Robert, having left his last name behind in the town. It was the same last name as the Burgermeister's, and Cordage thought it prudent, for reasons that will later become clear, that Robert release it to his own destiny. Robert was wet because he had fallen in the duck pond, just as Cordage had landed in the mule paddock, having been thrown out of the inn at Watts Hump when the innkeeper discovered they had no money to pay for their porridge. "Rascals!" he cried, and he tossed them out windows at opposite end of the tiny hut that passed for an inn in those parts at that time. This was immediately after the witch had foretold their doom, that one of them would end up living in New House in the city, and the other would end up living under a bridge in the same city. They sat in the haystack, considering this fate. They didn't know which was which because the witch didn't know, and she had been silenced before she could complete her dark prognostications. Neither do we know at this time which will live in New House and which will live under a bridge. That it will become clear in time, we can only hope. I should explain that I know about the episode at the inn, the window out-throwing, and the business with the witch, because I was there. In fact, the witch who was able to get only halfway through the prophecy before being summarily silenced was none other than me, myself. It may surprise you, but it should not. I have been and done many things. At that time, I was a witch, and that is all you need to know about it. In any event, sitting at the inn, enjoying a cider of my own, I saw these 2 road-weary boys eating bowls of porridge. Bedraggled as they were better dressed than the rest of the clientele, and I was taken with the sudden familiar feeling of prophecy. I approached the boys and offered to reveal their future, both their futures, in fact, for a single bronze knuckle, half the going rate. A bronze knuckle, you will remember, is a small coin, at the time was worth a round bun in the city, or 2 apples in the town, or 2 bowls of porridge at an inn in the country, or a mug of cider, coincidentally. In any event, the boys were intrigued by my offer, and after some childish bickering, produced a knuckle, an old and dingy and badly scratched one, but sufficient to the purpose. I told them what I have already told you, that one would live here and the other there, and was about to continue when the older boy, only by 4 months, but older nonetheless, said "Balderdash," and shut me up like a clam. He no doubt thought, as most do, that the word was a simple expression of disbelief, but it is in fact a powerful, magic word that will stop any prognosticator in her, or in this case my, tracks. So none of us learned the rest of the prophecy, and neither will you at this time. I kept the knuckle, of course. I couldn't have known it was the poor boy's last coin, but being shut up like a clam is an uncomfortable circumstance at the best of times. The knuckle was little enough payment for my troubles. As it was, I would be unable to speak another word of prophecy to either of them until what I had already said had come to pass. Balderdash, a powerful word with far-reaching and mysterious effects. You would do well to remember this word and use it sparingly, if at all. I ain't gonna live under no bridge, Cordage muttered. He brushed horse manure out of his hair. What are you worried about? Robert shivered. Was she even a real witch? I ain't, Cordage said, gonna live under no bridge. He paused. Get rid of that stupid duck. Robert shook his head. No, he's mine. He followed me out of the pond. He tightened his arms around the plump white bird and shivered again. That don't mean nothing, said Cordage. Ducks will follow anybody, like a sheep does. Ducks are the sheep of the bird world. He scowled and flopped backwards into the haystack. Besides, that's a girl duck anyway. The white ones are girls and the brown ones are the boys. Robert shook his head again and then shivered as a fresh trickle of water ran from his hair down his spine. I fell on him and he followed me out of the pond and he's mine and I'm going to keep him. Fine, said Cordage. Fine, said Robert. Fine, said Cordage. I don't think she was a real witch. That duck smells. You smell like horse poo. Both points were apparently irrefutable, and the boys were silent for a time. So now what? Said Robert. I'm going to find that witch and get our knuckle back. It was my knuckle. I'm going to get it back. I'm not going back. If we go back, that innkeeper will take my duck. Stupid duck, Cordage snorted. Stupid witch. The duck quacked softly as the light began to fade. If I had neglected until now to tell you about the duck, it is only because, in my experience, ducks are easily overlooked. And in truth, I didn't learn about it myself until later. After the boys were thrown out of their respective windows, I sat in the half-light of the inn and kept my thoughts to myself. The balderdash episode had put a damper on my mood, so I finished my cider in silence, paid my fare with a knuckle I happened to have handy, and headed home. It would soon grow dark, and the cabbages needed hoeing. I was thusly engaged when the two of them happened along the lane that leads past my little home. The taller one, they were both rather short, called out to me, interrupting my solitary cabbage-hoeing reverie. You, witch, you owe us a knuckle. I confess it was a moment before I recognized them. Such is the power of the balderdash that the encounter had been nearly erased from my memory. They were, on the whole, an unremarkable pair of boys. The duck, moreover, confused the matter. Do I look like a witch? I said. Do I have a witch's hat on my head? In fact, I do not. I am not your witch. You are our witch. Go get your hat and put it back on and give us our knuckle. At the mention of the knuckle, the whole unfortunate event came rushing back. If I had known, if I'd had even the tiniest inkling of what the ensuing exchange would cost me in time and worry, I would have stopped it right there and sent the boys on their way with a short word and a swift boot. But alas, I let my argumentative nature get the better of me. Not for the first time, mind you, nor the last, and set my hoe aside in order to address them more directly. First, it is not your knuckle, it's mine. You trade it to me fair and square for a genuine glimpse into your futures. Second, it's not mine anymore either. I paid it to the innkeeper for a passable mug of cider, so the knuckle is gone, on its way, fulfilling its destiny as an agent of commerce. Good day. I picked up my hoe and returned my attention to the cabbages. But you didn't give us the whole thing. You stopped right in the middle. I think the damp one with the duck said that, but the light was dim and made the details tricky. No, you stopped me in the middle with your cursed curse. Besides, I was giving you two prophecies, one for each of you, so you really got two halves, which is the same as a whole one, so we're even. I turned and headed toward my little hut. Clearly the cabbages would have to wait. They straggled along behind me, variously whining and quacking and complaining. No, we're not even, said the dry boy. Give us the rest, or give us half a knuckle. Alas, I could do neither. It is common knowledge that one can't continue with a truncated prophecy until the parts already revealed have come to pass. Besides, as I have already explained, the knuckle was out of my hands. Yet they pestered me all the way back to my humble home, completely unwilling to accept the plain truth of the matter. Finally, to get them to be quiet, I offered them some cabbage stew and a place by the fire for the night. The dry, smelly one was disinclined, but the damp one seemed eager for the opportunity to stop shivering. So in the end, we had a wholesome, if somewhat bland supper, and they fell asleep straight away, curled up like puppies by the fire. They were so endearing, it was almost painful for me to go through their pockets as they slept. boys came back 2 hours later, grimy and sweating. I'm telling you, said Cordage to Robert, you don't know the difference between an onion and a weed. They all look the same to me, said Robert. He came over to where I sat at the table, hunched over the cards. Where's the egg? He asked. Resting comfortably, I said. What are you doing? I tried the dice, I tried the bones, I tried the crystal. The cards are my last resort. For what? I'm trying to read my future, but it's no use. I pointed the stem of my pipe at Cordage. Your cursed curse has blinded me to your fates, no matter what I try. Oh, balderdash. Stop saying that, I said. You have no idea the power that word holds. He rolled his eyes and sat down heavily on the corner of the woodbox. And since I can also not see my own future, that can only mean our fates are somehow entwined, I continued, most uncomfortable. How do these cards work? Robert looked over my shoulder, holding the duck. The vagabond fortune tellers use cards with pictures, but these are just regular cards, like when our uncle loses money to the butcher. I continued gazing at the cards while I answered. Any card can mean something if one is lucky and if one has the sight. I put a red 6 on a black 7. It said nothing to me. And if the inner voice has not been silenced. I gave Corded my best fierce glance. He shrugged. All right, that's fine or terrible or whatever, he said. But can you help us now? We weeded the whole onion patch. Robert pulled some onions up, but we might have put them back. I considered the two of them. Managing children is not what you might call my greatest talent. So the matter demanded careful attention. How much would they eat? How much work were they prepared to do? How much would they complain in the meantime? I prefer not to be rushed through decisions with potentially disastrous financial implications, but in this case, the solution was obvious. Boys, I said, I have decided to help you on your way. I fetched a burlap sack and handed it to Cordage. You can take 2 cabbages and a few onions. There's a path through the woods that will lead you around Burgerton and on to the city, if that is where your fates take you, and if you don't get lost or eaten by bears. I led them outside and around the side of the house where I pointed to the trees at the edge of the fields. There's a little path back there that leads into the woods, used only by goats and by those that wish to travel quietly. The other path, the main path, goes back to the village, so gazing back up the more well-traveled path, I saw our mutual friend the innkeeper, perhaps a quarter of a mile away at the head of a dozen or so stern-looking villagers. They were working at fording a stream, which was doing little to lighten their mood. Some of them had sticks. I have led a long and complicated life. I have seen many places and dealt with a multitude of circumstances. Oh, yes, I have seen many things in my time, and one of the things I have seen more than once is a crowd of people stomping toward my house. Experience has shown that unless it is my birthday, the intent of the crowd is not to wish me good day and inquire about the health of my cabbages. The secret to my success in this tumultuous existence has been flexibility. Why stick doggedly to a plan once circumstances have changed? In fact, that day was not my birthday, and I suddenly felt that a change of scenery would be just the thing to liven up my autumn. Boys, I said, I have decided to show you the way myself. Back in the house. Back. I herded them in and bolted the door, quickly bundled some things in a blanket and handed it to Cordage. I gave the other blanket to Robert and put the stew pot on his head and grabbed my stick and my traveling hat and climbed out the back window. Fine morning, I said brightly. Perfect for a brisk walk through the fields. One of them blinked at me stupidly and the other one squinted. Well, come on then, I urged them. Let's not dilly-dally. The window? Really? Another time I might have congratulated Cordage on his cynicism, which would obviously take him far, but at that moment time was of the essence, as they say. It's the most direct route, I informed him. Why waste time going out the front door and all the way around the whole house when you can go straight out the back, cut through the fields, grab a few cabbages, and be safe in the forest in 2 shakes, or even 1 shake, a shake and a half at most. That's dumb, said Cordage. The house is so small, it don't matter. I ain't going out the window. And you call yourself a runaway, I said. Every good adventure starts by jumping out a window. You should know that from experience. It's dumb. The front door's locked, said Robert from inside. We're trapped. You see, I said, it's the window or nothing at this point. But we've already spent more time talking about it than... Robert came to the window, tried to climb out, and fell on his head, which was fortunately protected by the stew pot. Wise boy, I said. I dragged him to his feet and headed off through the field, followed by the scrambling and tumbling and grumbling and snorting of cordage. I still say it's dumb. Well, you can thank me when we're safe among the shadows of the trees. Safe from what? Said Robert. From those people coming up the path? Them? I said. Oh, that's nothing. They probably just want to talk about the goats. I'll settle that later. Settle what? Asked Robert. Did you do something to their goats? I did nothing to their goats, I said. Nothing they wouldn't have done themselves eventually anyway. No, really, said Cordage. What did you do? Turn them into sheep or something? They can't prove anything, I said. Sheep, goats, what's the difference, really? Zoologically speaking, they're practically the same animal. They'll get used to it. Give me that. I grabbed the burlap sack from him. Here we are, some lovely cabbages, perfect for a journey. And look, some onions already pulled. What great foresight on your part. Told you, said Robert to Cordage. I told you it was okay. The duck quacked in an affectedly offhand way, as if to remind us it was there. Be quiet, Clarence, said Robert. You'll give us away. They probably already seen us anyway, said Cordage. You, maybe, I said, not me. No one ever sees me unless I want them to. It's a trick of the trade. I can see you, said Robert. Or can you? I said. We had almost reached the trees when a muffled chorus of shouts rose up behind us. Across the cabbage fields, we could see the villagers surrounding my house, peering in the windows and trying to force open the door. They had yet to see us, but they were already fanning out over the yard as if they were looking for something. Looking for what we may never know. Our fates had placed us on a different path, and we were mere yards, then feet, then inches from it, at the end of the last field of the last farm in the last hamlet at the very edge of the country, with nothing but a low stone wall separating us from the vast wilderness of forest and mountain beyond. Over you go, boys. You can't get lost if you don't know where you're going. I thought we were going to the city, Robert protested. Time will tell, I said. We scrambled over the stones and disappeared into the trees, dropping out of the villager's sight and, for the foreseeable future, out of the history of Watts Hump.